Goeiedag, mijn naam is Evan, ik ben immigratieprocureur hier in Amerika. En ik wil jou helpen om immigratiewet te verstaan. Now, eerste, verschoon mij. I've told you before, there's construction going on in my house. So I'm locked in my office with my 3 dogs. You can see one of them is right here. Minnie, come here. Come, Minnie. Come here, sweet baby. Sweet little golden doodle. Love my dogs. So you might hear them bark if they hear noise. You might hear construction. But I was delayed in getting a video out to y'all because, as you know, it is right in the middle of the semester. I'm also a law school professor. I'm teaching classes. But I really wanted to have what we in the South call a come-to-Jesus moment with many of my Afrikaner friends and viewers here on YouTube. And it's perhaps the last time that I'm going to make a video on this topic because it's been beaten to death. But I really want you to understand why I'm so concerned and why I get so upset about this topic. And it kind of trends off of the last video that I made. And again, there's so many things that I want to discuss and do on this channel to help Afrikaners both inside South Africa and here in the United States, to help potential refugees, to help potential asylum seekers, and also to help Americans understand the plight of the Afrikaner, not just for refugees, but for those who want to stay inside Africa and the future of Afrikaners in your native country and you know, in the place where you grew up and where you belong as well. Not just those who want to come over here and be productive members of society here. But this is, again, the issue of persecution and returning to South Africa. And the reason that I want you to understand why this is such a hot topic for me is, since this program started, and for those of you who might be new and don't know my background, I am an immigration attorney on top of being a law school professor. I started practicing immigration law now about 5 years ago. And about 3 years ago, I was one of the only associate at the firm that I work for that did not speak another language. And I had tried so many languages in my lifetime, whether it was in high school, like Spanish and French. In college, I took German. I could never learn a language. I took Arabic for a while. I even spent some time in Israel and in Palestine and in the West Bank trying to learn Arabic and just gallivanting around to try and get the language because I thought it would be an important language and a relevant language to know in today's day and age. And I failed every time. So I went to Google one day and I Googled easiest language for an English speaker to learn, and Afrikaans came up. This is about 3 years ago now, so I started taking Afrikaans lessons with a private tutor online. And I still suck at the language, but I think I've gotten decently proficient at it. I can speak decently well. I just can't understand what the heck people are saying when they reply to me. And my accent is cock, but it doesn't matter. It is what it is. You can still at least understand me, and my tutors can understand me as well. But through learning Afrikaans, I learned a lot about the culture and traditions of Afrikaners, your people, South Africa, that went far above and beyond what most Americans know. Because when you say, like when my family would be like, you know, Evan, what are you learning? And I'm like, oh, Afrikaans. Like, what's that? It's the language of people of white European descent in South Africa. The first thing in their mind is apartheid. The first thing in their mind is racism. And that's everyone. And it doesn't mean that's what they stick on, but that's just all that we knew. So when you hear that, most people just snap to the common stereotypes and misconceptions of white South Africans. And I got far above and beyond that in learning the history and traditions of Afrikaners and learning about South Africa. So when the refugee program was first announced by President Trump's executive order in February, I jumped at the chance to try and help. And since that time, in the immigration world, I have had many of y'all who are here in the United States come and tell me, you know, Evan, we've spoken to other law firms, and they've said to represent us for asylum, they were charging upwards of $10,000 or $15,000 or $18,000. And that seems absurd, or they weren't interested in helping us at all. And I said, that makes sense to me. And it made sense to me because most immigration professionals, and this doesn't, you don't need a PhD to understand this, lean politically to the left and are desperately trying, and again, this is their political philosophy or belief, I'm not knocking it, it is what it is, I can disagree, to help people from Central or South America, or the stereotypical idea of an immigrant that you think when you think of people coming to the United States. So when they hear white South African, they think apartheid, they think racism. In fact, I've told you I've stopped making videos a number of times on this channel because as a law school professor And as someone in the world of academia, merely saying you support Afrikaners has now become a dog whistle for white supremacy and racism. Even coming out and saying you believe, and I do believe because the facts are in front of us, that there is persecution, not just discrimination or harassment, but persecution of Afrikaners, other people of white European descent and other minorities inside Africa, coming out and saying that can get you labeled as a white nationalist, a white supremacist, as a racist. So the reason that so many immigration professionals were not wanting to take on Afrikaners is because of this racist stereotype. And a lot of this feeds into now, as I talk to colleagues in the field and other people who do this, feeds into this continued question that comes up about returning to South Africa. And I'm specifically talking about Afrikaners who are here in the United States on various different types of visas, and this desire for many of them to apply for the refugee program, and if they get an interview, go back for the interview, or in the case of the Amerikaners, which won't let you submit an application if you're outside of the country, of going back to South Africa and then applying for the refugee program. And I have said time and time again, this does not make sense. And I want to show you something. Someone, and I had to block them from the channel, was saying, I don't understand. You can't apply the law to the refugee program because that's not how it works. Let me explain something to you. Asylum, what I've worked in for the last 5 years, and refugee programs use the same definitions, standards, and terminology. In fact, I'll put it up on the screen. For you to even be able to apply for asylum, you must be defined as a refugee. So that same definition of who you are, someone who has already fled or who cannot or will not return to their native country for fear of persecution by the government or someone the government is unable or unwilling to control due to an immutable characteristic, is the same definition for an asylee and for a refugee. All asylees must be refugees. That's the law. That's how it works. So every single standard that is being held to in an asylum program is the same standard that in theory is being held to in a refugee program. The only difference is in a refugee program, the government has already come out for the most part and made the determination that there is persecution in this country. You simply have to articulate it to your USCIS refugee officer to be admitted into the program. Whereas on asylum cases, it's almost as if that individual is walking in there alone and they have the entire burden of proving to the U.S. government that persecution due to an immutable characteristic exists. So yes, it is the same standards, it is the same terminology. Persecution, as I've told you, what every USCIS asylum officer and refugee officer acknowledges it to be is extreme levels of conduct. It goes far above and beyond mere discrimination and harassment. In fact, U.S. courts have even defined discrimination and harassment to be things like the Jim Crow laws that existed here in the United States. For those of you who don't know, the Jim Crow laws were the laws that came into being after the abolition of slavery in order to keep African Americans in a subservient place in the society here in the country. So things like whites-only restaurants, whites-only water fountains, colored water fountains. You'll see coloreds only, whites only. The same thing that happened in apartheid South Africa, the U.S. government has determined to be discrimination and harassment, but not persecution, to show you how high that bar is for persecution. So things like being killed, being imprisoned, assault, battery, rape, torture, these are extreme levels of conduct. And when people in the immigration world see all these conversations on social media, and by the way, if we can see it, guess who can also see it? The U.S. government, which is in many ways, and again, this is all just my opinion here, but I've been doing this long enough to know the government does look at the internet, the government does go through social media, that for all the asylum seekers here, when USCIS asylum officers are doing their background investigations on the country conditions of South Africa and the treatment of Afrikaners, when they see people saying, can I leave for holiday and then come back and apply for the refugee program, they are instantly going to acknowledge that as there is no persecution in South Africa. Now, I 100%, and here's the hard thing for me, that's why I said a come to Jesus moment, like some tough love here. I care, honestly, the support for this channel. And for those of you out there, forgive me for rambling today, but I need to just get this off my chest to end this discussion here, has been so great, and I wish that I could do more to help all of you. And I am your most ardent supporter here in the United States. I firmly believe there is persecution of Afrikaners in South Africa. I firmly believe we are on stage 7 or stage 8 of the 10 steps of genocide. And if it's not stopped, people like Malema, if they ever get in charge of the South African government, will execute a genocide against Afrikaners and other people of white European descent. I believe all of this. But the visual, the optics of it, when I see comments of, I'm only going to leave the country to go on a holiday, then I'm going to come back, will that affect my chances? Well, honestly, my friend, it should. And this is why I'm having a hard time with these people who are advocating for H visa holders in the United States to go back and file for the refugee program, because that, to me, completely undermines your claim of persecution. And as I've told you, me, Evan the person, if I find out that this is true, that you can go back and it does not impact, and by the way, I'm talking about people here in the United States, because Afrikaners here in the United States, you have an option, you have asylum. And that's what it's there for. That's why you cannot be a refugee if you're physically in the United States. The only option is to apply for asylum. You meet the same requirements of who a refugee is, but your option is to apply for asylum. So, while anyone else who's outside in other countries that may not offer relief or asylum, if your visa is about to expire, you don't have an option but to go back. You just have to be able to somehow articulate that to your refugee officer, why your fear of future persecution didn't overcome this necessity to come back as opposed to going somewhere else, let's say. And I don't necessarily have an answer for you. But my point being is that if, for those of you who are here, when people are giving you advice to go back, if I hear that it's true, Evan the human being, who will not care one iota that this isn't following the law, will not care one iota that this isn't, that was the wrong way to say it, isn't following traditionally what has been defined as persecution, all of these things, I will jump for joy and I will put out on this platform that all of you here in the United States need to go back. But as far as I've heard, and this is only anecdotally because no one's given me proof, one person in the initial group, in the proof of concept that Colonel Wyatt called it, which we don't even know what the necessarily what the standards were, or who what USCIS was doing in that case, as opposed to the in-place program that we have now. So again, I don't put any faith in that. But when I hear proof, when I get actual proof of people who have been here and gone back and passed the USCIS interview and have a well-founded fear of future persecution, I will scream from the rafters that you all need to leave right now. All the clients who are in my law firm, drop it, go back. This is your option. Asylum is so difficult, if not impossible. If you want to escape persecution forever and remain here in the United States, you do that. But I haven't heard that. And all of these immigration attorneys who are turning down Afrikaners, who are mad, who are spiteful, all the people who are upset that this is the only active refugee program when all others have been shut down, what they're angry about, for the most part, is this continued narrative of people saying, let's go back and apply for the refugee program. That's not persecution by the letter of the law and what we've understood it to be in every single other situation. You would not expect that you would go back to a place where you fear death, torture, imprisonment for no reason, assault, battery, or rape. Those are the examples. Extreme levels of conduct. And by the way, it's more than that too. It's threats. It's threats of all of these things, like Malema, like the EFF, threatening to kill the boar, kill the farmer. So it doesn't necessarily have to be something that it physically happens to you. It could be the threat of it. But to return to that, when you just look at the elements of what is required for refugees or asylees, let's stick to refugees, that it is persecution, and I've explained to you that high level in many previous videos, that it is done by the government or someone the government is unable or unwilling to control. That sounds terrifying, but you're going to go back to that? And it is because of an immutable characteristic, like race, something you can't change or something you shouldn't have to change. So I can't change the fact that I'm white. I go back there as a white person. The government or someone the government just can't or won't control is going to kill me, to rape me, to hit me, to assault me, to torture me, to deprive me of my freedom. You don't go back to that. And this narrative has now been spread far and wide of people on social media saying, I'm going to go back, or what if I go for a holiday? Seriously? And again, I know people who've said, I'm not trying to offend anyone. I'm not. This is just like Evan's tough love moment here of saying you really have to do an inventory of what it is, you think persecution is. Because there are plenty of places, like if you look at Jim Crow United States, where black people were heavily discriminated against, and the U.S. courts have said that was discrimination, not persecution. So I've seen clients hysterically crying, pleading with immigration judges not to be sent back. They would do anything to not go back. I've seen this in Georgia, in Russia, especially with everything going on recently, in many countries. And then I've seen people in countries where the countries just suck. And I'm sorry, but your country sucking and having high crime and being a deplorable place is not a reason for an asylum program or a refugee program. Now, I do believe Afrikaners are in need of this program, and I will fight tooth and nail and shout it from the rooftops, regardless of the implications to myself in doing so, and all of the fear of being labeled because you take up the cause of an Afrikaner, you're a white supremacist, you're a white nationalist. I'm willing to do all of that and continue this channel to help all of y'all, but you've got to help yourselves too. So I will say, and I'm leaving it at this, until I hear and until I get proof that going back does not undermine the well-founded fear of future persecution, which would undermine any asylum claim, and asylees are refugees by U.S. law, and it has always been understood that. And persecution is such a high level of conduct that going back would seem to be insane. Until I hear proof, I will maintain that going back is a terrible idea, because I could not in good faith as a USCIS refugee officer believe you have a well-founded fear of future persecution if you came back. If you leave to go on holiday and come back, I will maintain that would undermine your fear and I would reject you, but I am not the refugee officer. The second I hear differently, y'all will be the first to know. The second I have proof, y'all will be the first to know. And I hope it is true. I hope it is true. But I can't believe that it is until I see proof. So this is the last time I want to talk about this. You have to understand why I'm so adamant about it. Why I'm so diehard on this idea that going back would have to undermine your claim for fear of future persecution, because it just doesn't make sense. Well, as always, I'm going to do a lot on this channel. Please remember to like, subscribe, share. Stay safe, and I'll see you for the next video.